1160. And we are on the line this morning with Senior Editor for Consumer Reports, Donna Rosato. And what we just heard of from IRMC is certainly a part of what we're talking about with Donna this morning. Our conversation brought to you by Marcus and Mack, a law firm representing injured people. Donna, good morning.
Good morning.
It's good to have you with us here today as we talk about the vaccine. And, we hear all kinds of things about the effectiveness of the vaccine. We hear about the vaccine chasers who are standing in line waiting to get it. We even hear some things about people who say, you know what, I'm not sure I want to get it. Now, you have a Consumer Reports poll that says 2/3 of Americans believe that the COVID-19 vaccination should be mandatory for people in some jobs. So I want to talk with you about this. The poll is really extensive, isn't it?
Yes, it is. We not only asked people about their feeling. We've been tracking since the vaccine was announced last summer. How do people feel about taking it? And I think we've seen a consistent group, a sizable number of people who still aren't willing to take it, though it's ticked up a bit since the fall. And we found about 1/3 of adults said they're not too likely or not at all likely to get the vaccine. So we wanted to ask this other question, the second question, can you be required to take it? Considering a good number of people don't want to take it. So I dug into answering that question. Could you be required to get the vaccine? And the super interesting thing we found was we said, well, how do you feel about the vaccine being mandatory in particular jobs or particular situations? Mm-hmm. And it said 2/3 of Americans in our poll said it was a nationally representative poll. They said that they believe the vaccine should be mandatory for people in at least one of the jobs we asked about, which was the top ones were healthcare workers and teachers. And then another 58%, they thought people should be required to show proof they've been vaccinated before they could participate in one or more of the activities we asked about, like traveling on an airplane, attending a concert, going to an amusement park. So there was this real contrast, this hesitancy there still, but yet a desire to have people who are out there around other people getting vaccinated.
Donna, let's go back and talk about legalities that are involved here and what EEO says about it, Equal Employment Opportunity, and the Department of Labor. Are people or can people lose their jobs or not get a job because of a refusal to be vaccinated in America today?
Potentially. Now, there is a long history of mandatory vaccination programs in the U.S. I will start with President Biden said last month, in December, he does not support a federal vaccine mandate. And this is a decision that is typically left to states. And the law is on the side of states who believe vaccines should be required for some groups in some situations. And I think, we all know those. We're very familiar with schools, for example. Every state in the U.S. requires K through 12 students going to public schools and many private schools to get a series of childhood vaccinations, though there are exemptions, and I think we're probably familiar with those exemptions, often for religious reasons or certainly for any health reason. You can't be required to take it. Many states require health workers to get the flu shot. We've seen that, for example, even in health emergencies, could prompt new vaccine regulations. There was a measles outbreak at Disneyland in 2015, and California passed a law saying daycare workers must have vaccinations. But to go to your second point, which is really, what if I still am hesitant? Do I want to do that? And the law, has is on the side of being able to require it, but employers, let's start with that. In anticipation of the COVID vaccine rolling out, the Equal Employment Opportunities Commission updated guidance that it had first when the swine flu outbreak happened in 2009 to employers say what's the legal ramifications of doing a mandatory vaccination program. Mm-hmm. Employers can require that if they have 15 or more employees, but there are a lot of legal protections for workers before you would get to the point where you might lose your job. So the Americans with Disabilities Act and under the Civil Rights Act say, again, for health reasons and as well as religious reasons, you can refuse the vaccination. But more importantly, employers are expected to make a reasonable accommodation for any worker who requests exemptions from the vaccine. And we're already seeing that these days, where a lot of people are able to do their job from home. Maybe they can wear special protective equipment that, removes the risk. If an employer, if it's really a hardship or the job is just not suited to an accommodation, if you're a frontline worker, say in healthcare, in those cases, an employer might be able to terminate you.
We're talking with Donna Rosato, who is a senior editor at Consumer Reports. This poll by Consumer Reports, 2/3 of Americans believe that the COVID-19 vaccination should be mandatory for people in some jobs. But 33% of adults say they are not too likely or not at all likely to get the vaccine themselves. Donna, is what's standing in the way, the barrier to them agreeing to get a shot, is it the newness of the vaccine, would you feel?
Yes, I think you really hit the nail on the head. We've surveyed people, why don't you want to take the vaccine? And I think there's a hesitancy, and it's primarily safety concerns. There is people were very excited about the vaccine, but when it came out, some people felt, gee, was it rushed? Has there been enough testing on it? There are among some groups also a history of distrust of vaccines or medical care where it hasn't gone well. But I will say that people should remember that the FDA, even though it's under an emergency use authorization now, there were requirements to provide safety data. More than 70,000 people have been tested initially in those programs, and more continue to be. And manufacturers had to provide safety data on people who received the vaccine. And so far, the side effects have been very similar to effects from other vaccines that we're all familiar with. If you get the flu shot, you might have a headache, feel a little run down, and have soreness in your arms. Mm-hmm. But it's not the end of efforts to ensure vaccines are safe. People in the trials who participated will be monitored for several more years to see how their immunity lasts, any adverse effects, and people will continue to receive, to be tracked for anybody who does voluntarily receive the vaccine long term. We want to see, millions of people have received it so far, so there is no reason, people can be assured it will continue to be tracked.
It's really...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's really going to be interesting as the data comes in over the next several years, because we've heard of concerns for pregnant women. Should they get the vaccine, what will be the long-term effect there? For little kids, and does the vaccine affect them differently than anybody else? And those are things that can only be studied in a long term after, obviously, a long period of time.
Exactly. And I'll just underscore one point. We did talk to a lot of legal experts about this, but we also said, do you think that people will be required? And a lot of people we thought said they just don't think the practice will be widespread. Employers may not want to require it because if they do, they might have to cover the cost of it. Businesses, for example, should people be able to get on a plane or attend a concert to have that? Businesses might not want to alienate potential customers. But it's really the willingness may change over time because as the vaccine rolls out and people see a longer track record and maybe they see it's returning, it could help return to a more normal life, we probably don't need it to be mandatory. Hopefully enough people will voluntarily want to take it as time goes by.
Donna, you said a couple of moments ago something pretty intriguing as well, and that is the idea of being able to show proof that you've been vaccinated before you can get on a plane, before you can go into this facility or that. And that proof side of it is providing its own sort of drama, because what kind of proof would it be? Can people fake the proof? We heard about the cards that would be scannable, and whether that would be economically feasible, and whether it's fair that some could get that scannable card while others could not. There are all kinds of issues with the proof of it as well, and included among those issues, people faking it.
Yeah, no, there's definitely, that's a concern. There are programs in development that would, for example, allow, that would connect directly to your record with a healthcare provider. Like a card that can be scanned, like a COVID, ID, but that has technology behind it that you can't fake. And it would be encrypted and things like that. So there are things that are being developed because we do know that that's a risk. We haven't seen most. Well, let's say in the airline space, it's interesting. In November, the CEO of Australian airline Qantas said, as soon as the vaccine became widely available, that they would require the vaccine for passengers on international flights. And there is, we've seen that in some situations with travel, airlines the CDC has required airline travelers to show proof of a negative COVID test, or if you have the disease, a letter from your healthcare provider saying that you have recovered before boarding an international flight. So it's an important issue, but it is being worked on now to make sure that if people do want to show proof, or may in some situations be required, that it is legitimate and available to everyone.
Donna Rosato with us this morning. She's a senior editor from Consumer Reports. So, Donna, help us dig down on it. Where are we going to get these resources? How can we get down and dig down a little further on this particular report from Consumer Reports?
Oh, well, if you, we actually have the survey if you're interested. We detailed it. If you go to consumerreports.org, we're a nonprofit organization that does testing on everything. You might remember, might think of us for testing cars and washing machines, but we look a lot into nutrition, food and health safety, and this is an important area. If you go to consumerreports.org and you look for the story that we have under our health content, that you could be required to get vaccinated against COVID-19, you'll find all the details on our survey there.
Very good. Consumer Reports, they helped me buy my last lawnmower. Now they're going to help me with this. Donna, thank you so much for spending time with us today.
Great to talk with you. Thank you for having me on.
Have a wonderful day.
You too. Bye-bye.
It is the voice of Indiana County, WCCS, 101.1 FM and AM 1160 AM.